I'm so
Serious?
happy. Yes. Welcome, guys, to another episode of Firebuilders Live. My name is Josh Koerpel. Today, I have very special guest, Jason Gardner. Jason, welcome to the program, my man.
Great to be here. Thank you, Josh. So
Yeah.
psyched.
Yeah, me too, man. Thanks for being here. So you're coming to us from Paris, France at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh,
Perfect.
yes, I am. One question for my fans back home. Can I share this back on my page somehow?
Yeah.
Is it easy to do?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact,
Um,
if you just go onto my page, you'll get the link and you
right.
can share it to whoever you need. And so while you're doing
That'd be
that, let
good.
me
Yeah.
let me before we sort of get into
Oh, I
the
see.
introductions and stuff, if you're not familiar with how Firebuilders works, we stream live every day, Monday through Saturday at around 12 noon. I think today I was just telling Jason this is the first time I think we've ever started on time, which is amazing. And what we
Tight
do,
ship around here, man.
we bring on experts and we break down really complex topics into small things, things that you can do, baby steps, little micro goals that you can do every single day to get you on your way. And today we're gonna be talking about something that I personally love, which is the idea of taking something that you're passionate about, some topic, some theme, and crafting it into a tangible thing, like a book, a photographic book that you can hand somebody. There's no more like powerful way to show somebody your artistic concepts than to give them a book. And I can't think of a better person to actually talk about this than Jason. You know, dude, you've got this whole thing called visual anthropology, which I think is incredible. You know, you've shot for the Rolling Stones, New York Times, Photo District News, Spin Magazine, NPR. Your very first shot was shooting Carnival in Brazil, and now you're doing this new project, Rituals, Roots, and Rebels, where you're literally traveling around to places like Poland, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Austria, Guinea-Bissau, Sardinia, like all of these very, very unique places that have Carnival.
North Macedonia. This year I did 8. North Macedonia, also northern Greece, including small towns outside of Thessaloniki. Really, I go for small villages that have this very traditional carnival that's outside the norm, like outside the stereotypical. There's no bikinis. There's no people drunk on the well. There's people drunk on the streets, but it's all very traditional and it's very strong into their types of things that they are passionate about. And I'm all about passion, photographing that. But in general, what I love to photograph is culture, right? So, and that builds up to this thing called visual anthropology. Because in this day and these days nowadays, with everything so digital and so screen based, I love documenting these things that are so still analog and kind of gritty and real feeling and a throwback.
Well, I can tell you what, and we're actually on this episode, if you're watching right now, by the way, if you have questions or anything, throw them in the comments because we'll be able to bring those up. But we're actually going to do the very first time, for the first time ever, we're going to be sharing a screen on Firebuilders Live. We're actually going to see some of these photographs because they are incredible, dude. And by the way, like, you know, I have a personal history with this. My family has been going to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. My dad's been going there for, I want to say, the last 56, 57 years straight. We've got a crew down there. I've been there now 12, 13 times. We've got a big party and stuff. So I'm like well-versed in the whole New Orleans Mardi Gras, but so on the surface, man, like so much on the surface. And you were just bringing a completely new perspective to the idea of Carnival, something that I've never seen. So I'm super interested in this. So I guess, like, talk a little bit about how you ended up getting started, right? You had this passion in expressing culture. Was it just a situation where you wanted to express to people, to let people see the world the way that you saw the world?
Well, it was actually just first a desire to create a new portfolio and something I was passionate about. I've been a photographer for about 15 years, but always loved music. And I traveled a lot as a backpacker in my 20s. When I came back and I started shooting musicians as a profession, when I talked to art directors and creative directors, and they said, that's great that you shot these famous musicians. You shot Bob Dylan, Isaac Hayes, and all these people. But we want to see a more personal work. And I thought about it and I said, well, I love to travel. I love music, so let's go to Brazil. I mean, it was almost that simple. Sometimes first thought, best thought. But what I did was I did a lot of research in advance, and I started talking to people at first, like anyone who had been to Brazil before, any Brazilians in New York, where I was at the time. And then I started talking to more people who'd studied Brazil, like ethnomusicologists. And everyone had told me, you can go to Rio and see the carnival there and the samba. You can go to Bahia and see their thing. But those are both very well known and very well documented. They started encouraging me to go explore other areas of Brazil that were pretty well known, but not as well known internationally. So I ended up going to Recife in the northeast of Brazil. The first time I went was off season, like October, I want to say 2004. And because of these ethnographers, I had made some contacts with musicians and musician groups there, traditional groups. I did some shooting and some learning there, but everyone said you did a good start, but you have to come back for Carnival. So I sort of backed into this project. I didn't go to Brazil saying I want to shoot Carnival. It was because it was based on the music. So I went a few months later during February of the following year, and I shot a whole bunch of things and made more contacts and got all excited, but realized that, kind of like what you had mentioned, I really just started to pierce the surface. I didn't really go deeper. So I went back the next year. Every year I returned, since I knew it better, I started getting assignments from newspapers and magazines, and then I had a nonprofit hire me to shoot a separate project there. I started getting well known for that project. And every time I returned to the same place over and over, I went deeper and deeper and deeper into the culture of Carnival, what these people were doing, how they prepare. And then after the second and the third time, which I'll show you a little later in the show, I started being invited to more private kind of ceremonies and these different rituals that kind of really underlied what Carnival was about for them. So after about maybe the third time, I was like, this is a book. This is something different.
Well, and I remember like us talking about that a little bit earlier. Some of these places that you were invited into, even locals haven't seen a lot of that stuff. I mean, you were privy to just some experiences that a very select few people have seen, and you had to be invited in. It's not like you can just waltz into these places and start shooting.
No, for sure. A lot of the ceremonies are in unmarked houses. They're in the favela. Even the people in the favela said you can't go there yourself because it's just not safe, or they won't let you in or anything. It was coming back and showing work a lot and being genuine in my passion for their culture. And it was key to return because a lot of photographers go for one carnival and they never see them again. And I returned to build access. I brought prints. And back in the day, before digital was so prevalent, to bring an 8x10 print and give it to the family of the people I work with was huge.
That's awesome.
So so then they started saying they see my work when I showed it. They're like, oh, you're missing something. I want to show you a different part of my aspect. Come back on Saturday. I met them at like a corner. I remember like where a church on the highway where like a church and a gas station was, and we went in the favela like an hour and a half walk, and then we found this sort of unmarked house where this day-long ceremony occurred. And some of that stuff is in this book. So this is what the cover of the book looks like, by the way. And I'll show some digital on that, but it's just it has a spine and everything. It actually exists in the real world.
Yeah.
So
so real quick before we get in, because that's where I'd like to go. Now we can start talking about the book. But I want to answer one question. In fact, this just came through. So like, as you did this, were you by yourself, or did you have like maybe another person or a small team or something like that with you?
No, it was all by myself because a lot of the situations, not only did Carnival with a lot of people around, but a lot, especially with the practices of the groups and the ceremonies and rituals, it was better to have a light footprint. I mean, I would have, like, for example, more ceremonies, but even for the practices, a local would take me, as I said. But I didn't have an assistant, a lighting, anything. I shot super journalistically, with just mostly with natural ambient light. And my whole goal is to actually disappear, right? So like the best way I can make photographs is to not to have any effect on the people in the room. It's kind of
Sure.
hard. I mean, you can't tell
Yeah.
from the photo. You can't tell from sitting here, but I'm 6'1". I'm kind of a big guy. So like anything I do to like kind of crunch down with my camera and like not hide, but kind of not have a footprint, that's key. So short answer, yes, I went solo.
Well, so as you're sitting there, right? Because we can get into some of these photographs that are, these are shot like in the natural light. It just adds so much of a more natural is the wrong word here. It's like so much more of a sensationalism. Like you feel like you're there. Some of these shots are just nuts, man. So actually, let's do it. If you want to, let's first of all, like for everybody that's listening. In fact, before we get into the actual book part, I'm curious, right? The people that are listening to this and are passionate about something and want to share experiences, the way that they see the world, the way that they respect. Like for you, it was the music that led into the photographs. Um, they've got this idea in their heads, but it's to do it justice. They have to. It will require a larger scope of work. It's not just one or two photographs from Aruba and then you can get the gist. Like it's a larger scope of work. So what would you say the good way to start out as far as organizing in your head how to create one of these like photographic books?
Well, if you're organizing in your head how to create a book, photo book, or even maybe it's a presentation, or maybe it's even an exhibit, or maybe it's just even the photos on your wall, it's all the same idea. You want to think about the deeper themes that connect photos, right? And so I was forced to do that in organizing the book. How am I going to make chapters? What does this all mean? Specifically, in my situation, having shot it over multiple years, it wasn't really a chronological thing. That's out the window, right? So you have to think, what are the deeper themes involved? So if I can suggest one thing, it would be whether you started it or not. And if you started it, you look at the photos or the content you have. And if you haven't, then do some research and talk to people about the existing thing that you're looking to document and what are the deeper things enabling it. And what I mean by that, it's akin to, I think we said this before, akin to like video editing, right? And video shooting. If you do video editing or book or photo editing, and you see the content that you shot, and you're thinking, I wish I had this shot, I wish I had that shot, this transition or this thing, then it'll make you to be a better shooter. So I'm encouraging you and those out there, if you're thinking about the one thing to do, is try to anticipate that in advance, all the different types of imagery that you'd want to create or capture or look for in your trip or in your project or anything. Again, bring that back to my thing. After first or second trips, I looked at the carnival photos I had photographed, and some people started telling me, well, I want to see more of the place. I want to see more of the environment, the city itself. And I include the photos in the slideshow, but the point is that I didn't actually think of it that way. I was like, oh, what's in front of me? The carnival. Now, every time I go to a carnival, I try to photograph some landscapes and maybe a detail and different in the composite add up to a more rich experience of what it is to be there.
Like so for people that are watching or like looking at these photographs, it almost acts as what would be called an establishing shot, like in a film somewhere where they can establish themselves in a place and understand like where all this really cool stuff is happening.
Yeah, the classic shot, the drone shot coming in, starting a million miles away, come all the way in, or you just go on a building and go up high and just do a wide shot. But I also think filmically, when I do even my still photos of like wide, medium, tight, wide shot, the medium shot to show some environment, and tight, like maybe a detail or like close to person's face.
Let's actually check that out. I mean, we've got some examples. You want to flip to your book and we can see what that's all about?
I'm sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
Doing the screen or my actual book? Okay, right.
Yeah, here we go.
So this is the cover of the book, and I call it a flower in the mouth because it's multiple different meanings, but I'm trying to do a bit more of a poetic title than just carnival in the place. But flower in the mouth is actually connected to one of the characters we'll see in a little bit. But what I'm talking about, the wide shot, that's like the carnival in one of the old streets downtown. And some people tell me this is like a very surreal shot because of these floating things up here. But I didn't do any compositing. That's how it is.
And this is in Recife?
Yes, this is all in Recife. The book is about Pernambuco, which is the state in the northeast, of which Recife is the main city. Olinda is another city not far from there. That's a World Cultural Heritage Site. And then I photographed a lot in the countryside, the cane cutting region of that area. So showing the city and the country carnival at the same time.
Okay. So this is the wide shot that you're talking about. This is sort of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
establishing shot in a way.
yeah. And it's the sort of crowd shot. And the way I structured the book, I made it into, if you think about a pyramid, carnival, culture, and ceremony. So there's a carnival, the stuff on the streets, the culture that supports it, the different types of groups and all that, and then the ceremony, which is what we talked about earlier, of people inviting me into these sort of private ceremonies that made up the real interior world of the sort of behind the scenes of this carnival.
So
And yeah, when I talked to some people, when I showed this work to people in Recife itself, they say, I don't know what that is. I've never seen that before, because people tend to stay in their own neighborhood.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, just with the carnival culture and ceremony things, I really like how that's broken down. I mean, it takes this just very, very complex idea of carnival, and as somebody that's creative and wants to express that in a way, to people that aren't as familiar with the carnival and all of the nuances that come along with it, all the different facets. Thinking about breaking that down into large but logical chapters, I think is a great idea. Um, so okay,
It's
so
also sort of like different levels of private public, right? Like carnival is a
yeah,
very public thing on the streets. Culture is something like semi-private, like there's practices, but they're open, and ceremony is very much behind closed doors. So that's kind of
ceremonies
another way of thinking of.
were the invite only, where the ceremonies are the ceremonies, just out of curiosity, the ceremonies themselves, they're done privately before carnival, during carnival. They have meanings that
Before and
are
during. Yeah, the couple ones that I'll show are more like cleaning ceremonies, which are the ones right before carnival starts. But we'll get there. We'll get
okay.
there.
Cool. So
So, for example, this is what I was saying. Like after maybe the third or fourth time there, I was able to get onto rooftops and be able to show the city itself. Um, and so this is sort of like the culture, that how it stands in that. This is the medium shot in a sense, right? Show it's very colorful but very African based. And there's something about a mask that's actually universal, right? So that it's something in which you're hiding your identity, you're able to invert, you're able to transcend your daily life, you're able to almost like become another person, another character. And you see that in all masquerades, right? In Halloween, in in the States, and Mardi Gras, in all carnivals, but this one especially, people become these characters. And maybe this guy's like a plumber in daily life, but here he's this sort of pretty boy, and he's not Elvis. This is a Brazilian telenovela soap opera character that's very well known, like a TV character, and he dresses like this every year. This is another wide. So during this carnival is pretty well known within Brazil. It's pretty authentic and folkloric, but this is the Galo de Madrugada, which is the biggest carnival parade in Brazil, like over 1 million people. So this is the type of thing where it can be this huge production, but can also be a very intimate streets thing. This is the dolls of the Olinda, that town that I mentioned. And they're, like maybe 12-foot high dolls of people inside them, obviously carrying them, and the little cobblestone streets and such. So it gives you an idea. I mean, the way the intricate amount of dress that they do, and this is a little, there's some football players in that they put on the decal, but the gloves, I mean, this is a man. So, men can really express their femininity in a place in Brazil, which is traditionally more very Latino, the men are masculine, but during carnival, everything changes, right? So the men can express their femininity a little bit more.
And as you're going through a lot of these photos and you're deciding like which ones to include in the book and which ones to not include in the book, and then lay them out in a way where, did you have close-ups like this, but they would be full page spreads because you want people to zoom in on this particular detail, like this is important?
Good question. I think this photo is a full page spread in the book. I'd have to go dig it in the book at the moment. But to answer your question, to produce the book, I had a small team, right? So like I had a photo editor that could help me select and then sequence the photos, because the dirty secret is that photographers are the worst editors of their own work, right? So like we have so much emotional connection to our photos that sometimes you need a separate eye. Often you need a separate eye to say, this photo is empirically good, this photo is empirically not as good. Maybe I had 4 close-up shots. Let's put those all together on the screen. Which one works the best? Sometimes a photo is great, but it doesn't fit in the sequence. And there's a classic phrase in editing called kill your darlings, right? So like, even though you love this photo and you remember the time and how you were feeling when you're shooting the photo, or you took a 4-hour bus ride to make that photo, if it's not there, it doesn't matter.
If it doesn't fit,
Right.
You got to kill it.
Right. And I brought in a designer to help me put together the look and the feel of the book, which I'll talk about right at the end of this little slideshow. But in terms of your question was more like, how do you edit and put the work together? It's a collaborative process. It's an iterative process as well. It's like it's never together that first time. You take a first crack at it. You see certain sections are strong and certain sections don't flow. I showed it to a lot of people. And frankly, we've been editing it and designing it digitally, of course. Then I printed it out and stapled it together as of a book. And then I felt like what it felt like. And that made me change a lot of things, because like, let's say this photo that we're just looking at, the Brazil one, could you flip it back? Would that be a double truck, which is a full spread in the book? Probably not, because you know why? The spine goes right through his hands and the A. So maybe we would offset that one quarter to the left or 1/4 to the right. So we would lose this. So we would avoid the gutter, it's called.
And it seems to me like
weird things of design. Yeah.
Like and what you're describing is really getting in touch with, it's not all logical, right? Like I'm trying to, sometimes I have a tendency to try and break things down a little bit too logical and see if there's a system to do it. But it seems to me that there is a system, at least at first, but it really is the final edits of the book. The final way that you put these photos together has to do with more of a feeling than anything. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't have the flow that you want it to, and sometimes that's a little bit, it's hard to describe that, then it needs to be changed. It needs to be adjusted until that flow gets right.
Not to be wishy-washy, but yes and no. I mean, it's a little bit of both, right? It's some feel, there's no going to be one right answer, but there's also some logic to it as well. For example, the 3 chapters I talked about, that creates a little bit of a structure of the book, right? So when you have structure, you're kind of like, and I realized in this book, I wanted to make it a little bit more photojournalistic. I wanted to tell almost like a mini magazine spread in each 2 or 4 pages. So within that, it's like, okay, what are your hero photos? What's the photo that's the lead? And then what are your support photos, if that structure fits? And then where's your caption going to be for the hero photo? And then where's the little story going to be? So structure and design tend to help to give you some system, so to speak, but there's also, a little of an artistic eye to see like what actually just looks good and what you feel.
Yeah.
While staying, faithful to the theme, to the raw energy, the emotions that you felt when you were there, to try to convey that.
So is that part, so looping that back now to our one thing, and if you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, I want to put one of these together, how do you end up incorporating that into your visualizations? Did you just go out there and, like we were talking yesterday, and you kind of went out there without a plan, right? Like you just kind of sort of did it, and then you sort of saw what was working and what wasn't, and then just went with it. But what would you suggest that people do getting started, the easiest way to get this incorporated into their life? Should they just go out and start taking photos, do you think?
Well, just briefly, I did go mostly without a plan, also because back then, no one really replied to emails. You kind of just show up. You couldn't really make a shoot in advance. And the nature of carnival itself is very improvised. Is there a real carnival schedule? Yeah, roughly. This happens sometime on Sunday. Like we don't know the exact time. So you kind of have to roll with it by its very nature. But yes, I also, because I didn't have a direct plan, oh, I'm going to do this book and it's going to look exactly this way, I did show up and kind of just like understand the process as it went, understand the situation. So I would say the simplest way is to start. Yeah, keep in mind that it is iterative, like it's going to be evolving as you go. But to start in one direction, just take photos, maybe do some research, visual research as to what exists. So you're not kind of following the exact same path someone else did, and to give you some inspiration and visualization as to what might be there. So kind of having some idea of what it is. I've done a little bit more, now that I've done a bunch of carnivals, not just this Brazil one, but a bunch of carnivals in the new project. I've done as much visual research in advance, largely also to show up and seem knowledgeable about the carnival even before I've shot it before. So I have an idea, oh, this character means this. Oh, he's significant because, he's the leader, or she's really significant because she does this, duty or this task, right? So this like sort of role. So that's been a way for me to get my head around going to a new place, is to read up on it and understand it as far as recognizing the characters, recognizing the flow of what the day might look like, seeing some photos that already exist that it's okay, what have people gotten into? And then finding my own sort of niche within there to create based on what's occurring.
Have you done that where you've kind of inserted yourself into these situations and have some favorite photos, particularly from this book, from the Flower in the Mouth book? Like, what are some of your favorite photos from this book? Like the ones that you really think capture that
Go to the screen.
Spirit. All right, let's do it.
The Flower in the Mouth. This is the title photo of the book because it's so much happening in one photo. This is the Caboclo de Lança, which is the traditional carnival character of the countryside, the cane cutting region of Pernambuco. He puts the flower in his mouth, the story goes, to get him in the right mood, because 3 or 4 days of Brazilian summer, this is like February, which is the hottest part of the year, he's carrying 30 to 40 kilos of his costume, a lot of bells. So this is him before and after, and this is what they look like when they're in full regalia down the streets. So this kind of sequence of the carnival of the countryside I love too, because there's no bikinis here. There's no people like partying just to party. It's super traditional, and trust me, they do drink. They drink cachaça, which is like firewater basically, and it's strong. The other story I loved shooting in this was the story of in Recife, of a culture called maracatu, which is percussion based African roots music that usually people from the favela play, and a lot for pride, but also for to compete for every year for the carnival prize of the best musical and visual performance, in which case they're recognized as the king of carnival that year. And so I did a story of them making the drum, bending it, of taking the skin and wetting it before he ties on the head. And this is the old drums, what they look like and how they sort of tie it. This is what the spreads in the book look like. And about the queen is one of my favorite stories. She's not only the queen of the maracatu, she dresses in the finery, because this is an inversion again, which the people from the favela during carnival, they have a whole procession, which they're kings and queens, and there's a court and there's princes. And let me tell you, these people they don't have a lot of money, but they spend all of their sort of available funds on these costumes because it's directly linked to their identity. It's who we are. But the queen also does all the sewing. And it's also an inversion in Latin America. Usually it's the male who's head of everything, but in this case, it's the female. She's not only the queen of the parade, does all the costumes, but she's also the queen of the ceremony and tradition and religion that in that neighborhood. So it's a really powerful figure, the Queen Marivalda, that is her name. And this is another ceremony that I talked about, the third level carnival culture ceremony, where they take these eggs, it's a little out of order, sorry. They take these eggs in which they write the names of the relatives they want the gods to look over during carnival to protect them. And then they blow them on the eggs, and they do all this hours and hours of ceremony. But just to give you an idea, another ceremony in which this is a man dressed as a woman. He's just smoking regular tobacco, but that allows him to speak to the old orishas, and he comes speaking in tongues, and he's swirling around and all these crazy things. And this is what the tableau looked like with the pipes, the tobaccos, and all this crazy stuff. This is another limpeza, the other one with the eggs, and this one is a cleaning. So, like, in order for them to go out to the craziness of carnival, they have to prepare themselves spiritually. So a little bit of some stuff there. Briefly, when you talked about how do you put a book together, when I discussed it with my designer, I wanted to kind of convey the fact that this is like an old blues guy on the porch with a beat up guitar. So I showed her different ways to info, not just my photos. I showed her some videos and stuff, but I showed her this blues CD as a feeling for the type of font and typeface. And I don't know if you can see, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but I do a couple different treatments here of the typeface of these drop caps, these the way the font is produced. I'm going a little book nerd right now, but
yeah, that like kind grittiness to it, you know.
That grittiness. And then for the second, because it's in two languages, English and Portuguese, there's a slight differential in how the text is treated. So it's easy for you to see that there are two different languages. I also showed her a carnival program to give an idea of this is the native sort of colors and shapes of this year's carnival, to give some idea. And I also showed street art. I'm a musician, but the key thing was to show that this was this kind of feeling of this very popular type of feeling of this sort of like street art in the background, and how colorful the costumes were. The bright primary, the blues, and the yellows, and the reds. And in fact, these are the colors of the Pernambuco flag, the state flag. So these are very important colors. And so that's what drove some of the choices that we made in the book. The last choice we made in the book, and then I'll stop sharing the screen, is for the chapter heads. The chapter breaks, I wanted a 1 little second of coolness because it's so hot, all the other colors, all the very, very vivid. So this was a shot from one of the ceremonial botanicas where they sell different ceremonial items. And we changed that to a duotone for the chapter heads to give a little bit of sense of visual break for each chapter. I think the last thing, let's flip back to my screen. Let's stop the screen sharing, because the last thing I showed you was inspiration. I'm going to show you guys in the back of the book. So this is the book, back of the book. In the back of the book, I also added a digital download card. So I licensed 9 tracks of music from the musicians who I work with. So people could, and you just, there's a little code in the back. When you get the book, you pull off the card and download code. And so people can download 9 tracks of music and listen to what some of the sounds sound like while looking at the book. That's some idea of a multimedia experience.
That's awesome.
I'm trying to be a little innovative here. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, and to hear the authentic sounds of what you would hear if you were implanted in those places. Was it what did it, I mean, was it mainly like strings? Did it sound like what you would imagine mainstream carnival music sounded like, or what were they?
No, it's I mean, the maracatu, these drums are like huge, so it's very, very deep drumming and dancing and parading, almost militant through the streets and singing. So like the other carnival, there's a couple of videos on my site, particularly on the book page, which I put together like a 3-minute video showing a little teaser of everything, but not worth getting into at this moment. But you can take a look on my site, jasongardner.net. The music in the countryside was very different, super fast paced. Like if you think not to musician nerd out, but like everything's in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The music was in 1. It was so fast. It was like, and it really trance-inducing, in a very real way, not just for me, but for, I think, the people participating in it.
One thing that I've wanted to ask you since we've started talking is what drives you to do this? Is it more of just a general sense of curiosity and appreciation for the culture and the music, or are you able to like go to some of these ceremonies and bring back pieces of the humanity, of the gratitude, the graciousness of your hosts, maybe even the practices? Like, do you bring that back and try to incorporate them into your life somehow? Or do you just use them as a point of reference as you now kind of interpret your life in Paris at the moment?
I think a little more towards the first. I have a deep appreciation for culture and the fact that people are doing these things that have been occurring for thousands of years, right? Through a very specific line of kind of passing it down through the generations. Interesting has been for me in continuing after I did the Carnival in Brazil book and continuing to explore the concept of what is Carnival throughout the world. I went to New Orleans. I went to the Cajun country in Louisiana, which is totally different Carnival. I went to Trinidad. And then when I moved to Europe, Paris, about 4 years ago, I started exploring Europe. What's that like? Seeing some similarities and differences, but the fact that there's this very common theme of not just masking, but wanting to mark the change of the season with something completely different. Having the way almost like a steam, like a pressure cooker release. It releases the steam, right? It releases the pressure. You're able to kind of party and do whatever you want, and the rules are lifted. But also, it shows the depth of what humans can. It shows the depth of the human condition in terms of how they express their most profound sort of ideas and thoughts through this festival. So my whole thing is that the interesting part for me is that it's not just a party. People spend all year preparing for it. That's somewhat common, I mean, there are some to take it extreme. There are some carnivals that I shot in Austria this year and last year that happen only once every 5 years. So they're preparing for a long time and thinking about it for a long time.
Do they use it in the same way as like a pressure release? It's just that that's extended over 5 years instead, or
no, it's the reverse. It's the 5 years added up into 1 day. It's like 1 day.
No way.
And it all, they have a lot of practices. They have a lot of stuff. But the one main day is the day, And so it's in a way, there's a little bit of pressure release, but it's also just homage to kind of their ancestors, This is how we've done it. Let's carry the tradition. And that's why I say roots, rhythms, but also rebels. They're a little bit it's a little bit of a pushback to modernity, to it's all fine and good that we're doing all this new technology stuff, but let's stay in some of the old ways.
Yeah, something that feels a little bit better, just ancestrally feels better.
Yeah. But do I take it back in my daily practice? I mean, it affects my life because seeing all these interesting things, seeing the people of passion, how they invest a lot of their energy and time and money and sort of brain space into doing this thing. And it makes me appreciate it's a constant wonder of the world, what these people are doing, that the carnival crazies. And I find kind of in a sense my cult, it's my tribe, right? My extended tribe, because they see in me very quickly that I'm crazy for carnival too, in a very deep way, So oh yeah, he's had a crazy too. He's doing all these things.
Yeah, he's okay.
It's a little easier now that I have a track record of a lot of these work. But the first thing I do every time I show up in a new place, I take out my phone, I show them all the different places, and they're they start getting ideas that's what that is, and that comes from that, and you've been around. Okay, let's go get crazy. Come on.
yeah, man, that's so cool. Oh God, this has been such an interesting conversation, dude. Tell everybody now what you're doing. You touched on it a little bit. Now you're traveling to all these different places. You're putting together a new project. How can people get in touch with you? How can people find out more about what you're doing today?
Yeah. My site is jasongardner.net. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram either via my site or we can post it later. Currently, what I'm doing is, since I was lucky enough in January and February to shoot 8 different carnivals, I'm going through about 22,000 photos that I shot, and I'm getting there, but it's going slowly. So that's keeping me busy during the confinement. While we're not officially confined, we're taking it easy now and really focusing inward. I'm also doing besides that, my sort of social media project is doing something called Armchair Traveler, which is on my Facebook and Instagram feed, which is just one photo from my archive per day, travel photo of just to take you to a different place and to show just to brighten your feed a little bit. So that's kind of going on. And if you want to, I think you can share the link, but I have some books remaining of the Flower Mountain.
Yeah, it's in the description actually of this video. It's in there. Yeah.
Yep. So we can, I ship them from the States or from Europe, primarily from the States, but I have some in Europe where I can send along. And for the only people watching of this live stream right now, if you do it, you can put in the code free ship in all caps, FREESHIP, to get free shipping on me.
Oh, dude,
just for Firebuilders.
That's super generous, man. Thank you so much. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Seriously, guys, for everybody that's watching, I mean, one, support Jason. This is awesome work. I mean, you were showing people a world that I have never seen before. I've been fortunate enough to see some of your photographs from this new project, and they are incredible. So support Jason any way that you can. Get some books. I know I've got a few people that I'm going to be getting this book and sending to.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because like I said, my family, we're all like super crazy about Carnival, but not even close to this depth. So I have such an amazing appreciation for what you're doing.
Right.
And
but as I continue to edit the Retour au Carnaval, Roots, Rhythms, and Rites, I'm going to be sending out at some point, once some more photos are edited, I'm sending out a separate campaign of this is going to be what the book is like. And definitely, if you'd like, subscribe to my email list. And I'm happy. I don't send many. I send once every couple of months max. I don't send you a lot of emails. But as that project develops, which will be the next book and exhibits, I will let everyone know.
Okay. Dude, thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's fun.
Such an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks for showing up. We got to start on time. We went through these amazing photos. You got any parting words for anybody at the last minute before we go?
Shoot what you love. Shoot what you love. Just like when you say about writers, write what you love. Shoot what you love. Even if it's shooting, I've seen a lot of projects where people are just shooting in their backyard or photographing their wife or their husband. Just shoot what you love and keep doing it and work at it. Yeah.
Here we go.
Because if you shoot what you love, it's not work. I'd love to see other questions too. I'm happy.
Yeah. In fact, one just came through before we go. Question, Jason, common themes between cultures and all these carnivals. Yeah, what common themes have been the most fascinating? That's a good question.
I think some we talked about was like the idea of the concept of the mask, which as soon as you put on the mask, as soon as one puts on the mask, it's possible that one could be transported and become another character and transcend their daily life. But one thing I didn't talk about that I've seen over and over again is the concept of the mock wedding or the mock marriage. And, you see usually men are dressed up as brides, right? And the whole point, it's a little bit to make fun and it's a social satire, but it's also to mark the change of the seasons, to mark that Carnival is a lot about birth and death. And with marriages, I saw one thing, just as a brief thing, in Slovenia, in a small village. You're supposed to get married during Carnival time, but if there's no weddings that year, then all of the unwed women have to get together and marry a tree. Seriously, they carry a tree through the village, and they do a whole ceremony where they marry the tree. So there's this real old world concept of virility and fertility. And so if they don't do the carnival ritual as they've done it, there's a potential to lose this cycle and this sort of like, it's very rural and farmer type thing. If that helps you at all.
Just curious, what do they do if they meet a guy the next year? Do they have to divorce the tree and then get married to the guy, or is it?
No, it's a ritual marriage.
How does that
tree,
work?
yeah.
Okay, dude, that's nuts.
Some of the other, and some of the other carnival themes I've seen have been very animist and very animalistic. So homage to the sheep or the bear or the cow or the ox. Often the ox, especially in Brazil, but many other countries, is another sign of virility, of fertility, And you see a lot of, in Sardinia, in Guinea-Bissau, in Austria, like people dress as animals, but that's the very traditional costume. And it's fascinating to see. Yeah.
Well, man, let me throw this.
Hope that helps.
Yeah. Oh, this was great. And then Sterling, just some tree love. Yep.
Love.
Yeah, this is, man, so good to talk with you. If there's any other questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, this is going to be Jason and I signing off. I love the shoot what you love advice. I think that's really good advice for people that are listening. Just shoot what you love. Yeah, and it doesn't matter what camera you have. Don't worry about the technical stuff. You use your phone, fine. Yeah. Get a good camera. Know how to use it, but don't freak out about it. Yep. Man, thank you again for being on the show. This has been great. So this is Jason and I signing off. Until next time, another episode of Firebuilders. Thanks, guys, for watching, and have yourselves a great day. Yep. See ya. Bye.